Don't worry, I'm not presenting. So our third panelist for this second half is going to be Rachel Mahoney. So she serves as the senior mental health clinician at Survivors of Torture International. So prior to her current role, she served survivors as a clinical case manager and as a mental health contractor for the Refugee School Impact Grant Program, where she used trauma-focused therapeutic techniques to lead support groups for recently resettled refugee youth and families in East County, San Diego. So she's provided training for attorneys, mental health practitioners, social service organizations, university faculty, and refugee resettlement workers on trauma-informed care, culturally responsive mental health approaches, torture treatment, and human rights promotion. She holds a Master of Social Work from San Diego State, where she focused her coursework on newcomer mental health, trauma treatment, immigration policy, and gender equity. And she also has her BA in Anthropology and Middle Eastern and North African Studies from UCLA. She's also a member of the San Diego Rapid Response Network.
This is forward, this is back. Ooh. And she's also terrified of public speaking, so
You got it.
we're going to be trauma-informed with ourselves tonight. And I'm realizing how filthy my glasses are up here. Okay. So I live in a place of gratitude. That's where I try to spend most of my time. So I want to extend gratitude to the School of Social Work, the students, the partners, the faculty, everybody who helped bring all of us together tonight, all of us as warriors and witnesses. And I am so humbled to be here and to be sharing a stage with one of my great life mentors and one of my new mentors who I was privileged to meet tonight and to share the space with you all. So I certainly don't think of myself as an expert, but what I can share are some of my experiences working with the most phenomenal human beings that I have ever come into contact with. And that's really saying something because I'm a social worker, and all of us, I think, worship the folks that we serve because we see their value. So I'll do my best to stick on time. I'm very transparent, and Survivors gives a lot of trainings and outreach to our community. So if you want this presentation, and for whatever reason it may not be available, just reach out to me. I'll be here. Come talk to me, and I can fill you in a little bit more about what I'm not able to cover here. So, oh yeah, the formatting is going to be a little messy, it looks like, so please bear with me. I would like someone in the audience, some brave person, to raise his or her, their hand, and take a guess what all these folks have in common. Yes? Yeah, they all survived torture, absolutely. So we see here, torture, it discriminates, but it doesn't discriminate, right? All of these folks are proponents of things that were determined to be politically dangerous. So they were living in places where their ideas, their values, their vocations made them politically dangerous, and they were tortured for it. So I think it's important to put in context, why is there a torture treatment center in San Diego County? And why am I up here tonight on a stage where the focus is newcomers, asylum seekers, refugees, migrants, right? Because in this country that all of us are living in and existing in every day, we've got 1.3 million torture survivors. These are our brothers and sisters, right? They're our community partners, they're our colleagues, they're our doctors, they are our teachers. These are the folks that we're interacting with on a daily basis, and we may not know it. And right here in our county, we've got 35,000 survivors of torture. I want all of us to take a second and think about what this means statistically when you're driving to work or taking the bus to work, you're going to Starbucks, you are talking to your neighbor, you are getting a phone call from a telemarketer. These are people that we have been interacting with, and often they live in the shadows more than almost any other demographic that I can think of. So I'm here to kind of take them out of the shadows as much as I can. Some background about who we are at Survivors. I am so privileged to work for an organization that believes there is hope and healing and rebuilding of lives after something as heinous and egregious and evil as torture. So we have been right here since 1997. Our current executive director is one of our co-founders. She was working in refugee resettlement all over the state of California and other Western states, and she realized there was a huge gap. So many of these folks that she was resettling talked about their experiences before resettlement, while living in camps, and she recognized there was nobody really doing this work in her region. So Kathy started this organization at her kitchen table, and that just blows my mind. So we have been around for more than 20 years. We're the only accredited torture treatment center in San Diego, but there exists consortiums on the local level, within the state of California, nationally, and internationally. So there are a lot of us doing this work, but somehow not enough of us. This is our mission. I won't read it to you, but just know that all of us who do this work really do embody this mission. We live it out on a daily basis. And this is who we serve. So I've done my best to highlight one important piece. Survivors is what we call ourselves for short. We serve survivors of state-sponsored torture. This means that these folks have been targeted by their governments, by the people in power who are supposed to be protecting them, who are supposed to be guaranteeing their human and civil rights. These are the folks who are torturing our clients at Survivors. We have been fortunate to serve more than 3,000 folks. They come from more than 80 countries. They speak and write more than 70 languages. These are kids. These are grandmothers. These are parents. These are primary and secondary survivors. And what we mean by that is if the government, let's say paramilitary forces, come to my home and say, you need to stop doing your work in the health clinic. This is not okay. It's not okay to teach women that they have access to birth control. You are dangerous. If you don't stop, we will rape you. And let's say I go back to work, so they follow through, and they come back the next week, and they rape me in front of my entire family. I'm a primary survivor of torture in that case. But even the folks in my family who might not have been there that night to witness this evil that has happened, those folks will be impacted. So torture and trauma ripples across families, across communities, and down generations. And that's why we take a really global public health approach to torture treatment at Survivors. Another thing I want to highlight is our services are not dependent upon the legal status of a person. They are dependent upon whether or not that person meets the United Nations definition of torture. So it just happens that the majority of folks in our caseload are asylum seekers. And the majority of people in our caseload have always been asylum seekers because there's a strong network in place for refugees. Before they enter, while they're in transit, and after they come to the US, there are organizations doing the work to help them get resettled. And asylum seekers don't have that. They arrive, they have no legal status, they do not have a legal right to work, they do not qualify for any kind of public benefits, they are not automatically enrolled in ESL classes, they are not automatically signed up for here's where you're going to live. They're not provided silverware and bags of rice. And though we wish there were an infrastructure in place, there just isn't. So that's why we are here in San Diego. The effects of torture, too many to count, frankly. This is something that unmoors who a person is in every way. And as a mental health clinician, the majority of time that I spend with my folks is assessing and helping them bolster themselves against the symptoms of PTSD, major depressive disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder, which typically happen all at the same time. So that's just the mental, emotional, behavioral health. But as you can imagine, there are a lot of physical effects of torture, not just from the torture itself, but we see very high incidence of high cholesterol, high blood pressure, diabetes. Our bodies hold trauma inside them, and if this trauma goes untreated, it will manifest in some way. So we try to provide a whole host of services that I'll go into. And this is a note that I had to include. This is a little guy from one of our school programs. He wrote, "I was born in Pakistan, but my country is Afghanistan, and I love my country. My country is good. I came to USA because there was fighting." So this is an elementary school little fella, and you can already see from one little note all the many lives that he has lived as a little guy right here in San Diego. So please keep that in mind, that there are children affected by this directly and indirectly that we interact with probably on a daily or weekly basis. As I said, our model is, it's broad. We are decentralized, which means we're a small and mighty team. But we rely on a huge network of contracted mental health clinicians who provide services for us, like individual and group therapy. These mental health clinicians also provide forensic services. And this means when we have folks coming here to seek asylum and they're saying, I can't go back to El Salvador, I can't go back to DRC, I can't go back to Yemen because I'll be tortured again or killed, we help them substantiate those claims by providing psychological evaluations and medical affidavits from licensed physicians that work with us pro bono. And this also allows us to provide a lot more services than just our small team could directly, and to provide them in much wider array of settings. So we go to people's homes, we go to our detention center right here in San Diego County, we go into schools, we meet people in safe, neutral spaces like libraries, parks, Starbucks, you name it. We try to reduce as many barriers as possible because asylum seekers and all survivors of torture face more barriers than any of us could imagine. So we also have a menu of services. We really let people pick what are you most comfortable with, what's going on in your life, and how do you see survivors meeting you where you are and helping you come out of this. So the way we serve is like this. Our clinic looks more like a home. Those of you, and there are many of you probably who have been to our clinic, we provide public tours. We have a kitchen, we have plants, we have windows, we have balconies. Kathy was so intentional when she picked this space. She didn't want something that felt sterile. She didn't want something that felt like these folks were going to re-enter a space where maybe their dignity would be taken from them again. So everybody who walks through our doors is offered coffee, water, tea, snacks. Here's where the bathroom keys are. Do you have questions about who I am? Do you need an interpreter right now, or do you need an interpreter for your appointment? We really try to close the gaps as much as possible. So our approaches are trauma-informed. They are culturally responsive, culturally humble. They're free, so no matter how much money our folks have, they never pay a dime for services, and nor should they have to. And most importantly, to me at least, is they're without time frame. Because what we know about trauma, and I'll disclose that I have a trauma narrative, a trauma history myself, it rears its head in really unpredictable ways, and sometimes I might be having a great day, and other times, not so much. So when you're working in a really prescribed mental health setting, and you only have 12 to 18 sessions, and you're trying to unpack something like being beaten by insurgency groups or raped or having fingers amputated, it doesn't happen in 12 to 18 sessions. We've had folks in our caseload for more than 20 years. I have 3 minutes left, I see you. So the second bullet point is pivotal. I work alongside interpreters every single day, and I am so fortunate because I speak English and some other languages very, very poorly, and that's actually a really good way to build rapport with people, is to try to learn a word or two in their language and humiliate yourself, because laughter is a good icebreaker. So you can't communicate what's going on inside you adequately in a language that you're still trying to learn, especially if you're trying to learn that language through intrusive memories of your torture, through panic attacks, through no sleep. Your brain is exhausted if you're sleeping 2 hours per night. So the interpreters that do this work alongside us are absolutely heroic. And I really want to point this out. I pulled this stat when I was in one of Engstrom's classes, and it really stuck with me. It really drove it home for me why this work is exactly what I want to be doing for the rest of my life. Refugees, and I put asylum seekers in brackets here because there's not a lot of research done on asylum seekers. They're an amorphic fluid group, are 10 times more likely to meet the DSM-5 criteria of PTSD than the general populations where they're resettled. And I make that distinction because a lot of us have some PTSD type symptoms. A lot of us have anxiety. We might have avoidance of things that we're not cool with. But these folks meet the DSM criteria. They can be diagnosed. And they often are diagnosed by clinicians who don't recognize that they're looking into the eyes of a torture survivor. So the triple trauma paradigm is a huge part of this. You brought this up beautifully, in a more beautiful way than I ever could. But trauma doesn't stop when the external safety is established. It lives on inside us. So the triple trauma paradigm is that there are 3 major prongs of trauma in newcomers. 1, what did you run from? What trauma happened to you that you were forced from your community? 2, the journey. So many of the folks I work with have lived for months at a time in 8, 9 countries. They speak multiple languages. They have had children literally while they're walking through jungles barefoot. They have had boats capsize on them. The journeys are horrendous. And then number 3, the trauma of resettling, especially in a social and political climate like the one all of us seem to be combating now. Thank you for what you're doing. It's not an easy thing to do to navigate new systems, especially when you are being told you're not welcome here, you're a mooch, you need to learn English, you don't have dignity, you are not my neighbor, and you need to go home. So take that with you. 3 traumas. And perhaps the most striking is that we detain asylum seekers in detention centers, which are indistinguishable from maximum security prisons. I've toured one. It was not an easy place to be, and I've never been held in a cell by my government. So the trauma lives on even after the safety around them is established. And this is where cultural responsiveness comes in. I use the term responsiveness because cultural competency is kind of a misconception. You can't become competent in something that isn't fixed. Culture changes, it intersects, so you have to just respond to it. You have to be sensitive to it. You have to be aware of it and do what you can with your client's culture, but also your own, all your biases. All of that comes into play in this work. So here's some generals of trauma-informed care in the place where I work. I won't read them all to you, but the biggest thing that I try to do every day is let my clients know you're the boss. And I have learned the word boss in about 15 languages. And I always start every assessment, every intake session, every follow-up session, every therapy session by reminding folks, remember, we are in a car. You are driving the car. I'm next to you in the passenger seat, and I won't get out until you tell me it's time. I'm right here with you. I'm going to bear witness. You get to control where we go, the pace, and when we stop. So that's what I try to do. I try to bolster resiliency, and that's going to move us into the next piece. I had to rep my girl, Audre Lorde. You can't do trauma-informed work if you're not doing it with yourself. My entire family, for the most part, is here. One of my very best friends from work is here tonight. There are familiar faces. All of these people, these professors that I have been so fortunate to have, all of them do torture treatment work with me. I walk on their shoulders every single day. They are the reason that I can get out of bed and hear these stories that tear me to shreds. If my cup were empty, I would be of absolutely no service to any of these folks. And I won't allow that. So you must take care of yourself, and probably the best way to do that is to focus on resiliency, right? To focus on people in our community who give me hope, like you and the story you shared, and vicarious resiliency. The things that I worry about, that I worried about when I was a new caseworker at Survivors, like someone comes in and says, I have 6 kids and we're gonna be homeless at the end of the week. that is something that used to just jar me, and I would freak out, and I would jump into action, and I would try to fix it, and I would say, okay, we're going to have a solution. I want you to come back tomorrow, and we're going to get you a place to live, I promise. And then she wouldn't show up for an appointment, and I would call her, and she would say, oh, I'm good. I was able to find a place to live. No problem. So really, giving yourself permission to not have all the answers is the best way to keep yourself from burning out. You don't have to fix people. They have within them all the strength and all the power and all the resiliency they need. You just have to sit with them and give them space, right, to recognize how incredibly resilient and phenomenal they are. So if there's one takeaway from tonight, I want all of you to practice saying thank you instead of I'm sorry. So a little thing you can do to help in your life, in your work, to have good self-care, to take care of yourself. Don't apologize for things. Be grateful for them. Be grateful for these opportunities. And please recognize that taking care of yourself is an act of political resistance. If you're doing political work or if you're supporting someone who's doing political work, you are a human rights observer, and I thank you.